Hello, my name is Dr. Jim Henry. I'm a clinical researcher at the National Center for Rehabilitative Auditory Research, located at the VA Medical Center in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Dr. Tara Zaug. I'm a research audiologist also at the National Center in Portland.
This is the first session of a 5-part video series. You can use these videos to learn how to manage your reactions to tinnitus. We want this experience to be interactive, so we'll ask you to pause the video now and again so that you can fill out a worksheet or do some other activity that we'll explain later. So be sure to keep the remote control handy so that you can pause the video when we ask you to.
Before we get started, we'd like you to gather up a few materials. You'll need a pen or a pencil to write with. You'll also need the workbook titled How to Manage Your Tinnitus, a step-by-step workbook. When you've got the workbook, open it up to the back and tear out a sound plan worksheet. If you need to, you can pause the video to gather your materials, and when you're ready to start working, restart the video.
We wish we could tell you that tinnitus can be cured. That's really what everybody wants, a cure. I have tinnitus, and I certainly want a cure. We want to be able to turn our tinnitus off or be able to reduce its loudness. There's a lot of research going on, but there's no cure yet. Although it can't be cured, you can learn to manage your reactions to tinnitus. No matter what method you use to manage your reactions to tinnitus, you're trying to accomplish basically the same goals. You want your emotional reactions to be reduced. You want your stress to be reduced. You want to pay little, if any, attention to your tinnitus. You want to make sure that tinnitus is not affecting any life activities in a major way. And you want to get to the point where further help from a doctor or a healthcare provider is no longer needed or wanted. So think about these goals. These are the goals of most people who have bothersome tinnitus. Are these your goals? Are there any other goals that we haven't covered here? It's important to mention that these goals can be reached even if the sound of your tinnitus doesn't change. We know that tinnitus can't be cured. We can't make it go away. We don't even know how to reduce its loudness in most cases. But the tinnitus can be managed in spite of all that. The overall purpose of this video session is to develop an action plan for using sound to manage your reactions to tinnitus. We're going to help you develop a sound plan using the sound plan worksheet. We already asked you to get out your workbook. Make sure you've got this in front of you. We're going to refer to it throughout this video session.
We're going to start out by reviewing the Tinnitus and Hearing Survey. We've got an example here of a filled out survey. Take a moment to look at the example survey. Then pause the video, open your workbook to the survey, fill it out, and when you're done, restart the video. Now that you've completed the Tinnitus and Hearing Survey, you're probably wondering, what does it tell me? Tinnitus problems and hearing problems are often confused. Sometimes people who have hearing problems will blame their hearing problems on their tinnitus. This survey helps you separate the problems. It'll help you figure out how much of the problem is a tinnitus problem and how much of it is a hearing problem. It's important to understand that because all of the things we'll talk about today will help you learn how to manage the kinds of problems that show up in Section A. These are tinnitus problems. The problems that show up in Section B are hearing problems. If you want help with hearing problems, you can talk to an audiologist. And Section C is loudness tolerance problems. If you want help with loudness tolerance problems, you can talk to an audiologist. You can also look in the appendix in your workbook called What to Do When Everyday Sounds Are Too Loud. There's some information there about loudness tolerance problems and how to handle them. But our focus today will be just on tinnitus problems, the kinds of things that show up in Section A. Next, we're going to learn how to make a sound plan to manage your tinnitus, and we're going to be using the sound plan worksheet as the guide. I'd like you to take a minute to pause the video, and if you haven't already done so, tear out a copy of the sound plan worksheet from the back of your workbook. Then restart the video when you're ready to begin.
We're going to start with number 1 on the sound plan worksheet. The first step is to write down your most bothersome tinnitus situation. And to do that, we're going to have you pause the video and locate the tinnitus problem checklist in your workbook. Fill out the checklist. Be sure each problem you chose on the checklist is a tinnitus problem and not a hearing problem. Once you have filled out the checklist, restart the video. So now you've answered number 1, number 2, and number 3 on the tinnitus problem checklist. Number 1 is your most bothersome tinnitus situation. So you've checked that. In this case, this person checked falling asleep at night as his or her most bothersome tinnitus situation. That situation gets written down in number 1 on the sound plan worksheet. So go ahead and do that and then restart the video.
Next, we'll discuss number 2 on the sound plan worksheet. We're going to start out by learning about the 3 types of sound to manage tinnitus: soothing sound, background sound, and interesting sound. We'll start out by learning about soothing sound. What is it? Soothing sound is any sound that makes you feel better as soon as you hear it. How can it help? By giving you a sense of relief from the tension and stress caused by tinnitus. When can it help? Anytime your tinnitus bothers you. We're going to ask you to take a moment to pause the video and find the relief scale in your workbook. It's called the relief scale for soothing sound. After you find the relief scale in your workbook, restart the video. Now that you've got the scale in front of you, we'll take a look at the instructions. The instructions say to choose a sound that you think will be soothing, then adjust the volume of the sound until you find the level that gives you the most relief. And then answer the question: when I listen to the sound, how much relief do I feel? 0 would be no relief at all, so that would mean when you turn on the sound, you don't feel any relief from the stress or tension caused by your tinnitus. And number 5 is complete relief. That would mean when you turn on the sound, you no longer have any stress or tension from your tinnitus. The scale is a tool for you to use to start figuring out which kinds of sounds are the most soothing for you. You can write down a sound that you like to listen to and give a rating. And once you've got a whole list of sounds, you'll start getting a feel for which sounds are the most soothing to you. There are also examples of different types of sounds on the Tinnitus Sound Demonstration CD located in the back of your workbook. We're going to give this a try. We're going to listen to a sound that's soothing for some people. While you listen to it, choose the amount of relief you feel. It will be either a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Now I'd like you to take a moment and pause the video. Write down the sound that you listened to and then circle the amount of relief it gave you. When you're done, restart the video. There are a few things about soothing sound to remember. The sound you just heard is more soothing to some people and less soothing to others. Your job is to find the sounds that are soothing for you. It might take time and patience to find the sounds that are the most soothing and helpful for you. And remember, never use sound that's irritating or annoying to you to manage your tinnitus. I've got an example here of Martha. Martha's tinnitus was making it hard for her to concentrate when she was reading. She began playing soothing sound when she read. The sense of relief she felt from the music made it easier for her to concentrate. Next, I'd like you to describe out loud what the purpose of soothing sound is. It might seem like an odd thing to do, but saying something out loud and in your own words can help you understand it better. So go ahead and pause the video and then restart it when you're done. Did you say something to the effect that you'll use soothing sound to make you feel better right away and provide relief from stress caused by the tinnitus? If so, great. You understand the purpose of using soothing sound.
We talked about soothing sound, and now we're going to talk about background sound. Background sound is any sound that is neutral. It's not soothing and it's not interesting. How can it help? Background sound reduces contrast to make it easier to ignore your tinnitus. We're going to explain that in just a moment. Background sound can help you any time of the day, morning, noon, or night. A good way to think about background sound is to think about a candle in a dark room. There's sharp contrast between the bright candle and the dark room. And in this situation, the candle naturally attracts a lot of attention. Now, if we turn the lights on, it looks very different. It's the same lit candle, but with the lights on. The contrast between the candle and the room has been reduced. The candle is just as bright as it was before, but now it attracts less attention because now there's other light in the room along with the candle. Here we have them side by side. Candle in a dark room on the left, the same candle but in a lighted room on the right. And notice how different they look. The candle on the left attracts your attention. The same candle on the right doesn't attract as much attention. Now imagine tinnitus in a quiet room. The tinnitus is the only sound that you hear, and there is sharp contrast between the tinnitus and the quiet room. And in this situation, the tinnitus naturally attracts a lot of attention. Now, turn on some sound. The tinnitus is exactly the same, but now it's in a background of sound. The contrast between the tinnitus and the quiet room has been reduced. The tinnitus is just as loud as before, but it attracts less attention because of the background sound. Here we have them side by side, tinnitus and quiet on the left, and tinnitus and background sound on the right. Now we want you to pause the video and find the tinnitus contrast activity in the workbook. Next, we'll try out the tinnitus contrast activity. We're going to start by asking you to spend a few moments listening to your tinnitus in quiet. This is the only time we're ever going to ask you to do this because we don't normally want you to listen to your tinnitus. And then we're going to turn on the background sound. Then, with the background sound turned on, notice the reduced contrast. Okay, here we go. Hopefully, by listening to this sound, you've noticed how reducing contrast with background sound makes it easier to ignore your tinnitus. Almost any sound can accomplish this same purpose. Here are a few important things to remember about background sound. Tinnitus is less likely to get your attention when you add background sound. You might not notice background sound helping you right away, but that doesn't mean that the sound is not helping you. Using a constant background sound over weeks or months can help you get better at ignoring your tinnitus over time. And when you're using background sound, never use any sound that is irritating or annoying when you're managing your tinnitus. Here is an example of using background sound to manage tinnitus. Janet had trouble concentrating when working on her computer. She now keeps a tabletop fountain running on her desk. The background sound from the fountain makes it easier for her to ignore her tinnitus while she is working. And now in your own words, what is the purpose of background sound? Go ahead and say it out loud. Like we said before, saying something out loud and in your own words can help you understand it better. Go ahead and pause the video and then restart it when you're done. Did you say something to the effect that you will use background sound to make it easier to ignore your tinnitus because there is other sound in the room? If so, great. You understand the purpose of using background sound.
Next, we'll discuss interesting sound. What is it? Interesting sound is any sound that keeps your attention. It's sound that involves active listening. How can it help? It helps you shift your attention away from your tinnitus and onto something else. When can it help? When you don't need to concentrate on something else. So interesting sound is a little different than soothing sound or background sound. Soothing sound and background sound can both be used anytime, but interesting sound can only be used when you don't need to concentrate on something else. So a lot of people use interesting sound when they want to relax or sleep. We're going to ask you to take a moment to pause the video and find this scale in your workbook. It's called the attention scale. After you find the scale in your workbook, restart the video. Now that you've got this page in front of you, we'll take a look at it. There are some instructions here. Choose a sound that you think will keep your attention. You want to choose a sound that you think will be interesting to you. Listen to the sound for at least 1 minute, and then choose the percent of attention focused on the sound while you're listening to it. We've got a little scale here you can use. 0% of attention focused on the other sound, 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%. And then you've got a place where you can write down a variety of interesting sounds that you've tried, along with a place to write down your rating. This is a little tool you can use to help you figure out which sounds are most interesting to you. We're going to give interesting sound a try here. I'm going to play a sound passage. I want you to listen to the passage, and while you listen, choose the percent of attention focused on the passage, either 0%, 25, 50, 75, or 100.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
Every precious minute of their 2.5 hours on the surface was programmed. Rock and soil samples were to be collected, photographs taken, experiments set up to catch unfiltered particles from the sun, to record moonquakes, to measure precisely by laser beam reflection the exact distance between moon and Earth.
Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over.
Houston, Columbia on the high gain, over.
Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That was an example of an interesting sound. I want you to take a moment and pause the video and write down the sound you listened to, and then circle the amount of your attention that was focused on the other sound, the amount of your attention focused on the passage. And when you're done, restart the video. We're all different, and the passage you just heard is more interesting to some people and less interesting to others. So your job is to find the sounds that are interesting to you. And just like with the other sounds, it might take time and patience to find the sounds that are most interesting and helpful for you. And remember, not to use sound that's irritating or annoying when you're trying to manage your tinnitus. We've got an example here. Patrick talks to his friends on the telephone to keep his mind off of his tinnitus. This is an example of using interesting sound to manage tinnitus. And now in your own words, what is the purpose of interesting sound? Just like before, say it to yourself out loud. Go ahead and pause the video and then restart it when you're done. Did you say something to the effect that you'll use interesting sound to get your mind off of your tinnitus and shift your attention to something else? If so, great. You understand the purpose of using interesting sound.
Now, let's review the 3 types of sound for managing tinnitus. So this is kind of a pop quiz. First question, which type of sound helps to shift attention away from tinnitus? Can you answer that? Here's the answer. Interesting sound helps to shift attention away from tinnitus. Second question, which type of sound helps to reduce stress or tension that is caused by tinnitus? The answer, soothing sound helps to reduce stress or tension that is caused by tinnitus. And the last question, which type of sound reduces contrast between tinnitus and a quiet environment to make it easier to ignore the tinnitus? Answer, background sound reduces contrast between tinnitus and a quiet environment.
Now that we've explained the 3 types of sound, I'd like you to put a check mark next to each type of sound that you could try to manage your most bothersome tinnitus situation. There really aren't any right or wrong answers here. You can choose one, you can choose 2 of them, or you could choose all 3 of them. The one exception would be if your most bothersome tinnitus situation is something that requires concentration. Then you don't want to pick interesting sound because you can't concentrate on whatever it is you need to concentrate on and listen to the interesting sound at the same time. But otherwise, you can pick any 1, 2, or 3, just whatever appeals to you the most. Now pause the video and put a check mark next to each type of sound that you might try to manage your most bothersome tinnitus situation. Before we move on to filling out the rest of the worksheet, let's look at an example worksheet. Here we have Bob's worksheet. You can see at the top that he has falling asleep at night listed as his most bothersome tinnitus situation. And down here we can see that he tried using background sound and interesting sound. We can see that Bob tried 3 different kinds of interesting sound and that talk radio was the most helpful for him. This brings up a question we often hear. Won't interesting sound keep me awake? Interesting sound can be a very powerful way to get your mind off of your tinnitus, and that helps some people relax enough to get to sleep. But for some people, it might not be helpful. We just really want to encourage you to be open to using sound in surprising or unusual ways to manage your tinnitus. So I'd like you to notice on the sound plan that Bob finds the radio helpful for getting to sleep, but that he was still waking up in the night and couldn't fall back to sleep because of his tinnitus. He didn't want to listen to the radio in the middle of the night, so now he keeps a fan running all night long, which reduces the contrast between his tinnitus and the quiet of his bedroom. The reduced contrast helps Bob stay asleep all night long. All right, now that you've seen an example of a filled out worksheet, let's move on to talking about how to fill out number 3 on the worksheet. On number 2 of the worksheet, you chose at least 1 type of sound to manage your most bothersome tinnitus situation. Now for number 3, you're going to write down the actual sounds you'll try using for each type of sound you checked in number 2. So Bob checked background sound and interesting sound, and for number 3, he has to write down the actual sounds he's going to use as background sound and interesting sound. To help you come up with ideas for choosing sounds, we've got a grid here. So for each type of sound you just learned about, you can use environmental sound, music, or speech. This might look a little confusing, but we'll explain all of it.
Let's start with environmental sound. There are actually 2 kinds of environmental sound. First, there are sounds of nature. Sounds of nature include moving water, beach sounds, forest sounds, animal sounds, windstorms, and so on. Man-made sounds include sounds like electric fan noise, shower sound, aircraft noise, wind chimes, traffic noise, radio, static, sounds like that. After environmental sound, there's music. There are many styles of music, and we all have our own preferred styles. You might like the beat